Hello, everyone. We wanted to come to you today, first of all, thanking you for joining us. We thought it important that we let you know that this episode was recorded before the events of the past 2 weeks. We thought it not to be responsible, not to acknowledge and address some of those issues that have come up. So, without further ado, I will shut my mouth and let Quo and the maestro Emmanuel Villaume, our special guest today, also talk about this as well.
And yes, so the episode that we're about to share with you, really wonderful conversation. I'll let you decide that for yourself, but it's a wonderful conversation with Maestro Emmanuel. And we wanted to, as Kristian said, kind of share with you what we felt when we first recorded the episode. And then in light of the very recent events that's happened globally, how we feel it necessary to address certain things and how we feel it necessary to kind of share our journey that we've had even after recording the episode, and just how necessary it is for all of us to come together through the arts. So, Maestro, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Kristian and Quo. I think the conversation we had a few weeks ago now, and that our listeners are going to hear now, is a very important conversation. And I had a great time with you. It was a difficult conversation because it's addressing issues of diversity, equity, and racial tensions, and what we should do as an industry to try to navigate all of this, as uncomfortable as it is. But it's important for the people who are going to listen to this to know, as you both said, that the murder of George Floyd had not happened yet. And I think this incredible moment in our history is making those issues even more important and more in the front. So the conversation, I think this is probably the positive, if any, aspect of what's happening now after this tragedy, and the tragedy we're still living and we will still live, is that conversation has to happen. Absolutely. You can't hide from it. And the thing I would like to say, and maybe I'm a little defensive with that, and so be it, is the conversation we had maybe would have had more emotion if the three of us had known that someone was murdered just because of his skin color. And so that emotion lacking, I hope it's not insensitive to some people. The second thing I would like to say, but I can't reform myself, is that knowing what we know now, this would have been more about me listening to you. Whereas we were in a format where Quo and Kristian were asking questions to Emmanuel, who is always happy to talk and to talk a little too much. And I think
it was an interview. I mean, we were interviewing you. We brought you on as our guest, but we get that, and I very much appreciate that. I very much appreciate you saying that. Right. I think we are living in a time where we've seen George Floyd, we've seen Breonna Taylor. Before that was Ahmaud Arbery. The list goes on and on and on. So I mean, we didn't want to come here acting like we did not know what was going on over the past couple of weeks. And also right. Quo and I did a live show a couple of days ago. So the maestro also felt it was important for his episode that we acknowledged it. So we wanted to be sure to do that.
Yeah. And that's what we just did. And I think we should do another show in a few weeks to really talk about what has changed since then, challenges for everybody that this has brought, but also maybe the opportunities and the really seismic effect it has on our industry. And we hope this will implement positive changes. I love you both.
I love you too, Maestro.
Okay, let's listen to this.
We do.
Great. So,
all right.
Enjoy the episode. As always, please come to us if you have any questions, any conversation. Just know that at the time, it was not the focus, but it should be the focus going forward. for everyone, not just those of us who are living in it. So thank you as always for watching, and let us know what you think. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristian Roberts. I'm the Director of Education at the Dallas Opera, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Quo Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
And we're here with another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian
and Quo.
And today we have a very, very special guest, world-renowned conductor, maestro extraordinaire. Sir, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Kristian. Hi, Quo. Just so happy to be with you today. I am Emmanuel Villaume. This is a French name. I live part in the US, part in Europe. And I am the music director of the Prague Philharmonia in Prague and the music director of the Dallas Opera in Dallas.
So we have the maestro with us today, folks, and I have to tell you, I have been under his baton, and it has always been a pleasure. He is an absolute pleasure to work with. Very warm, very about the music, very passionate. So I am very much looking forward to this episode today. So Quo, let's do a little, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Right. So today we're wanting to kind of get some information and some insight from someone who's so close to the music, maestro, who's so close to the music, and so passionate about the music. And as someone in a position who leads in multiple ways, right? Leading musicians, leading organizations, what music can mean for organizations and what music can mean for companies and for communities, and how we go about pulling together so that we can have that presence that's necessary to get everybody to come to opera or to come to art.
All right. So maestro, let's just go with the first question, because, and this could go so many different ways, but as Quo just said about your multifaceted background and your multifaceted roles that you have to take on, what is art to you?
Well, art to me is the thing that saved my life, literally, and art is something that has no direct utility or purpose or usage, but without it, I don't know if life would make sense for me. And it's also what gives sense to life. So this sounds like blah, 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 abstract. No, I was 8 years old and I was, can you imagine, shy. I had a lot of repressed thought and feelings. And I started singing in the chorus. And then we were singing also on stage for the opera in Strasbourg. And the minute I arrived backstage, I heard that music. I saw these people screaming their heads off, but with beautiful intensity. There was a truth there that I totally recognized, and that was giving myself a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, and that was putting everything together. And I knew this moment that this was the solution to that thing, dark thing, totally closed thing I had in myself that needed to open. And so art for me is what makes life bigger, juicier, more important. That helps me process my thoughts and my emotions. And that helps me connect better with my friends, with my community. So I think, it has no direct utility and purpose, but without it, life for me doesn't make any sense.
That's a fantastic answer. It was a beautiful answer. That covers sort of my next question as to what it means to you and why you do what you do. I think you explained it very beautifully. And I work in education, so when I hear about people's first experiences with art as a child, it always moves me in a lot of ways. And I have to tell you, you got to me a little bit because that dark space, I know a lot of artists who talk about that and how the art sort of brought them out of that place and continues to do so in a lot of ways.
And that dark place somehow moves still with you in life.
Yes.
And at the same time, the light you have and the way you go to that dark place and you turn it into something positive, and the way you turn it, it's not only about you, it's about communicating with other people and the community in general. That is the richness of what's happening. And that's what you always want to keep. I must say, in all my career, I am never bored in performances, because I always go to those places and actually sometimes think of specific things, the death of my sister, the fact I am not with that person anymore. You know, and those matters of life and death, they have an evolution toward my life. But my own artistry always goes back to this and try to rebound and project. And after a good performance, there are sometimes good performances. After a good performance, I think I'm a more authentic, deeper, and better person. And that's what I expect the audience is going to experience too, if I experience it with intensity and full honesty.
I completely agree. That's good. Sorry, we got to give you snaps on that. We give snaps when people say something good. Yes, when somebody says something good, that's what we do. So again, as somebody that's on the podium, Quo and I have a conversation all the time, and we talk about, what art means and what art means to the community and what it means to create art. And, we talk about the audience experience. We talk about, because you've explained what your experience is and why you do what you do, but what do you hope audiences will gain from operatic experiences or artistic experiences, period?
Right. So the opera is a very weird object, and it's, poetry has a certain efficiency artistically and a certain simplicity that is beautiful. And so, the poet is writing that mostly for him. He wants to be heard, but it's for him. And then if you read it, it's for you. You read it in your little room, you hide from your spouse because you're reading poetry or not, Opera is, you have everything. You have the music, you have the theater, you have the visual aspect, you have the dramaturgy, you have the social aspect, which has carried opera and polluted opera a lot. All of these things are super, 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 super dense and mixed together. It's an entertainment as much as it is art. And entertainment can be superb art, and art can be entertaining, but you need to understand the difference between the two. And my job as a conductor in most of the shows I'm doing is also to give pleasure to the audience, which is the entertainment part. But if I cater only to that, I might miss the artistic part. But if I'm too artsy-fartsy about the artistic part and too uptight about it, then the people are going to miss that artistic part because they don't have the fun of it. And it's actually fun for a lot of people as they get educated to go in something that's very sophisticated, very demanding, and doesn't seem like it's entertaining at first. So my job is to always balance that. And according to the response I feel from my colleagues in the pit, my colleagues on stage, but mostly the audience, because you do feel the way the audience is listening to you and connecting to the show when you are on the podium, I try to bring them to that, not to me, not even to the performer, to that work of art. I'm trying to bring it in there. And I take those ways, those paths of fun, pleasure, spectacular, literally spectacular, and then spiritually inspiring, involving, mentally engaging, provoking thoughts, provoking reactions, and so on and so on. So you have to balance those things. And I think you really need to almost have a plan for that and before. And then during the rehearsals, you need to really think of ways to implementing those things. And in the performance, it comes as a second nature. But the litmus test, what I always look for is, have I lost the audience or not? Mm-hmm. And okay, because I am a performer, I sometimes, they're not with me. I'm going to do something maybe, a little funky to just get their attention. I'm going to give them that little strong chord, energetic chord that might not be just correct artistically, just to make sure they are with me. I have no shame in that.
I have no problem with that quote. You're boiling. Go ask it, girl. Ask it. I see you.
I do. Just first snaps on everything, right?
That was good.
And then, because Maestro, in what you're sharing and what I'm understanding.
Stop maestro me. Call me.
No, I know, it's such a habit. Sorry.
It's a habit.
Such a habit. In what you're sharing, right? It's this delicate balance between creation and connection that takes place for me as an artist, but then also for those who are the audience. So it's this matter of give and take. And yes, you can study, and yes, you can create all this beautiful art, and you can do this extremely demanding work. But once you do it kind of right, the focus is on making sure that there is a connection there. And so if there fails to be a connection, or if the audience kind of doesn't get it, it's a matter of, we can create art for ourselves. I always be like, this is art for musicians. Like, this is music for musicians. And then like, this is music for everybody. And so it's finding that beautiful balance in between that keeps everybody engaged, right?
Right. But there is actually totally. But there is also a difference between my work, my role, and to describe it, to connect the work of art, the opera in that case, the musicians, the choristers, the supers, the audience. And there's a difference between that role I have, which is a very specific role in a performance, and the role I have as a music director. As a music director, my role is also to connect a community. But in order to implement this, I need to use very different tools than the ones I'm using as a conductor. And that is actually a very difficult role to connect that community. But I do think that is one of the missions in a positive way. That is one of the roles in a very authentic way of any art organization, and especially an opera company.
So my question is that, what kinds of ways have you done that? I know you have been on stages and been in pits all over the world. And I know you've been in some particular, hot spots of where controversial, tragic things have happened. And I'm wondering, in this type of situation, as a music director, as a conductor, as an artist, what do you think your role should be, but also what an arts organization role should be? Because have you had any experience where something has come to your attention that you've had to mitigate, sort of, and find a common voice, or start an initiative somewhere that you were like, I'm not quite sure how to play it, but it actually came out to be successful?
Okay, so yeah, so obviously I'm European, so I'm dealing with some of the social issues in the States as a foreigner, but I'm a human being. And I'm seeing issues that provoke my thoughts as a human being, and are also very much part of the American culture now. I was, what Kristian is referring to as, I was music director of the Spoleto USA Festival in Charleston, South Carolina, which has a very dark history, as you all know. It was the port entry of the trade of the slaves from Africa for more than a century. And I think it was probably the biggest port of entry for slaves in this continent. I was so happy as a music director there. Amazing communities, very interesting communities. But as a music director, and I had somehow an upper hand on the programming of not only opera, but also we were doing music, we were doing theater, we were doing ballet, poetry, and so on and so on. And I was working with the general director to deliver a programming that would be coherent every year, but that would also connect to the city.
Right.
That city had a monument to the Nazi camps' destructions in memories of all the victims of the barbarism and the craziness of the Nazis, there was no monument in the city acknowledging what had happened there.
Yeah.
Because it was, of course it was there. It was more there than anywhere else, but people would not necessarily feel comfortable talking about it. And some of those racial issues, social issues, they are still happening in all this country, and they're happening in a very different way in a city like Charleston. Amazing people on every side of the spectrum, amazing board, very, very smart and connected people. And the festival, which was created by an American composer, stage director, Giancarlo Menotti, who was both American and Italian, has changed the city over the years. I mean, literally changed the city. It's changed the architecture of the city, but it has changed the way various communities connect in the city. Absolutely. Some of this has been implemented just by providing art. Art is dealing with matter of life and death. What does it mean to be alive? What's the purpose of what we do? It's sometimes opening discussion on what the community is. Those discussions are not necessarily direct discussion, but just being exposed to art has changed the way a lot of people in the city were considering their lives and then interacting with each other. But as a music director and the general director, I have to give him credit, Nigel Redden at the time, really sought those questions should be directly addressed.
Yeah.
So but that was not only, oh, we should address this, and what can we do? Can we do something that shows we address this? It had to really be meaningful and with an intent to change something.
That's it.
Not only provoke a little reaction for a few minutes in a salon, but concretely change something. So the reason Menotti had chosen Charleston is that there were many theaters in the city. If you have a festival, you need many venues. And one of the venues that I personally liked very much, the Nigel liked it, and so did the technical director, was an old movie theater that had been changed into some kind of a gymnasium for a school. And that old movie theater was just literally at the border between some of the richest, poshest old mansions, the ones that had the slave quarter in the back. That are still, some of them, those houses are converted, in a little guest house. And on one side of that theater, and on the other side, projects, which mainly had very poor people with certain ethnicity and demographics.
Yeah.
The theater was just in the middle, but it was not used anymore because that was a dangerous place. That was a weird place. And it was just used by that school to do, sometimes, I don't know, they would run or they play basketball in it.
Yeah.
So we decided with the mayor, who was actually fantastic too, we decided to renovate that theater and make it one of the places where our audiences would meet. That meant people from those projects with the richest people and most educated people of the other side of the community in those old, beautiful mansions. And just that in itself is a very strong social statement. But we decided to open that theater with a work by Anthony Davis, which is called Amistad. And it's about that ship where the slaves rebelled and took over from the masters. And then there was a big trial about this very controversial topic that is addressing very directly the issues at stake in that city in the past, but also somehow today.
Yep.
And the board was on board, if I might say, with the whole on board of the ship and on board of the project to do this. And it was very heavy because the piece is not I mean, Anthony Davis is African American, and the librettist was African American too. And so I'm saying this because rehearsing the piece was very hard on some of the cast members.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is one piece where you cannot pretend to be colorblind, that's that piece. You know, you got to do it because that's what the piece is about. So you got to do it like that. You know, I mean, the whole colorblind question is a very complex one and so on. But in that case, I was not going to have it, you know, shuffle the cards. And that meant that for most of the African-American members of the cast, this story was resonating with themselves in a very deep way. And some of them had not understood what they were getting into. And then also then they get into it. And one rehearsal was so heavy and heated that, and I'm a white guy conducting that show and cracking the whip from the stand, you know, in a very, very weird way. And so we had to stop rehearsals and talk about what the piece was about, you know. And that was one of my most intense personal, human, but also artistic experience. Because all of a sudden, this piece of art was touching to things that were so humanly essential that my life was starting to resonate with it in a way that was changing myself and changing these people. So that's the rehearsal process. But then we went to the performances. And so we, you know, Kristian knows that more than anybody, we need to bring some audience in a very active way to the opera house because they think it's not for them. It's for these other people. It's for the rich people. It's for the white people or whatever, you know, those preconceptions. And so we had a lot of people coming from those projects and that were invited through church work, through school work, you know, what you do. And they were there, but we were not giving them, you know, cheap performances. We mixed them with the regular audience. And conversation really started happening in that place. And the neighborhood started changing, literally, neighborhood. So the minds were changed, the architecture would change, and I hope the souls were changed. That's what our role and our mission is, you know. And
you know, I hear you talking about this, and that is such it goes to what roles an opera company should play and what we should feel and fulfill. And we, you know, there's been a question which I've really has grinded my gears a little bit as far as, you know, should arts organizations, should opera companies, are we civic organizations? And for the life of me, I'm like, see, Quo's smiling, and I'm like, yes, we are. And what you just described was a prime example of how you can be.
Right. And you have to be, because you need to be, as we were saying, we're using the word, we need to be relevant. We need to be connecting. On the other hand, my role as a music director of any company is not to push my own political personal agenda.
Right.
Nobody cares. Well, you ladies care, my friends care, but the audience doesn't care what I think, and they should not. I should be here to provide a platform where people can think, can be provoked, can process, can interact, and can decide for themselves.
Yes.
I'm here not necessarily to educate them because there's something patronizing them, but I'm here to let them process those issues. And that's a mission that is not negotiable. I also understand some people just want to go to the opera because they had a tough week and they want to hear a nice love story.
Yes.
And it's fine, you know,
yes.
and you probably don't vote the way I vote, but it's fine too. And I welcome you with I hug you even if you want. I mean, if the virus is gone, which needs to be gone soon.
Yes, it needs to be gone soon.
But if that story is well told, if that story is beautifully told and authentically told, it's going to talk about humanity. It's going to talk about love. It's talk about, again, matters that are absolutely vital, essential, alive, and complex. and ambivalent. And so that person, I hope, will be a better person going out of that performance. If that person has also an understanding that can be a civic understanding, an understanding of political implication in the community, I'm very happy with that. So that's part of what I'm trying to provide to people. I'm not imposing, and how could I? And actually, a lot of the programming is also something that is a teamwork. I'm not imposing, I'm not pushing any of my political or religious or even philosophical conviction in the programming, but I make sure that those issues, including maybe the political issue in the most noble philosophical sense of the term, which is the polis, the city. What does it mean to be in a city? Right. Those issues need to be present. And so the way I place my operas, the way I work on the community outreach, the way I engage on various forums, and the way I present myself, that is very important. And that needs to be thought not only as a pure artist, but as someone who has a sense of the community.
That's a word. That's a word. Oh, go ahead. I know you got some stuff to say. Go ahead, friend. Let's talk about it, because the maestro is preaching. He is preaching today. Woo.
Speak on it, man. There are so many things that you said just in sharing your experience. And so in that, I hear that, one, you have to have the courage to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. It is not okay for you to kind of skate across or just simply kind of be neutral, because neutral only perpetuates the current system that we're in. So you want to talk about it. You want to talk about it so that people can have conversations and so that changes can start to happen.
But
right?
Quo, you need to talk about it. And this is true for any kind of the community, any color, any social thing, not condescendingly.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And that works for everybody. That means I'm not going to preach to you, I'm not going to ignore the issues. I'm not going to preach to you. I'm just saying, here's a possibility for a conversation. Open the door if you want.
Yes.
And so that needs real respect of various people. And it's difficult. Because sometimes you say, come on.
Yeah. Can't you hear me?
Right. It's very difficult in those spaces because it's about creating the opportunity for conversation, like what this show is about, meaningful conversation, and then inviting others to participate in that conversation, understanding that as we engage more and more, we may not have the answer we want immediately, like within the first minute.
But also, in order to engage people, I need to make sure they come to the hall. Right. So if I do a show that the three of us think is amazing and we'll love it and it's exactly what we want to talk about, but people are going to say, it's again Quo and Kristian and Emmanuel talking about the same thing, I'm not going to go there, then you've lost. Yeah. You're preaching to an empty assembly, and just to the stools and the chairs. So that's where it's very difficult.
Right.
That's where that's the balance. But you talked about how that is balance. And so what I also heard from you is not only the conversation, but also the follow through.
The follow through, right?
Exactly. And what's around and where I want to push things, where I need to really pay from my own flesh and personality to try to get there, and that's not easy because normally we are lost in so many tasks, and one of them is to balance financially that ship that is really hard to move, and then you have a tempest coming your way. So you say, well, those ideas are good, but I just need to make sure I can open the door next week, So that is very tough. On the other hand, if you are not relevant artistically and civically, then you're not going to survive long term. So you cannot ignore those issues. You cannot ignore those questions. And when I hear, well, maybe we can cut some of those initiatives, they are not vital to us. I say, well, it's not like it's optional.
Right.
It's part of a big organism.
Right.
So what you have on the main stage, what you have backstage, what you have across the street is the same earth. And it's vibrating together. And that's hard. because some of those questions are vital questions for an organization. Can I afford to do that? Why should I do this? Which goes back to a question that is even a bigger question, goes back to your first question, what is art? Why would you spend millions of dollars doing stupid opera with stories that nobody can really relate to unless they really try very hard, with people screaming on the top of their lungs, while a few blocks away you have people dying because they don't have enough to eat? That is a tough question. That's a question I ask myself. But then I say, what do you consider yourself? How do you define yourself as a community? Mm-hmm. You are not providing the mental, the soul, the spiritual material for that community to work on its own issues and deal with the poor people there. And in the end, you have to give food for the soul and the minds. And it's not one or the other. It's not negotiable. So you need to feed these people who need to be fed. And these people, it's either their stomach or their spirit and their soul. This goes together. And it's a very tough question because at one point you also need to balance that.
Right.
And so that is the sense of responsibility I have as a leader and as a programmer to the community. It's a financial responsibility. It's also a civic responsibility. And that means that whenever I'm spending money, because we spend a lot of money, I need to spend it mindfully and respectfully. I cannot just throw it away because it was given to me.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's on my shoulders all the time. And at the same time, I get irritated when I say, well, you're not doing much here, and there are so many issues that are so important. I don't relate to what you do. And this is not for me. This is elitist. I don't know. It's just you're not connecting to it because nobody connected you to it. Let me try to connect you to it. Mm. And if I can change your mind there, I'm going to change the mind of the other person who might help you on these other issues you want to deal with. Very hard, very difficult, because you have to make constant choices and you have to constantly see the big pictures in every detail of what you do.
Yes.
That's it. You know what? That's it in a nutshell. I mean, and so when I think about this, and this is the part of the show where we start coming to the positive things that we see coming out of this. And this is when I ask I ask Quo, well, what are the positive notes? Because the maestro has given us so much to think about and has provided so much to think about from a very unique position and perspective. So out of this entire conversation, I mean, Quo, I know you got some nuggets. I see them. Go ahead.
So just even in the positive notes in the conversation with you for what we're having even today. So it's a matter of take on the emotional labor, right? And then don't expect just communities who are not connecting to you to take on the labor. It's a matter of do the work. And in doing the work, understand that we all have work to do and we all have different perspectives as we come to opera, as we come to art. No one perspective, no matter how long it's been in place, is more important than another perspective. And so once we're able to kind of remove those barriers, right? Work to remove the barriers, actively work to make a change, to remove the barriers, we'll have a better opportunity for people to decide for themselves whether or not this is for them. But if we make that decision by not including people or by making assumptions about certain communities or making or catering to other communities, then we lose the opportunity to actually truly create a wonderful art form and a wonderful experience, right? Because the art is what we create, but truly the art is the moment that we have right there in that space, right? That's what we're creating. We're creating that moment, that experience together right there in that space. And so for positive notes, it's a matter of follow examples, right? Follow the examples that have been set. And then as we follow examples, know that, again, people are doing the work, but it takes you personally committing to the work to get it done. Nobody else is going to move in for you to do it. If you have the ability to make those decisions, make the decisions, stand on those decisions, and then again, know that you're not standing alone, because in the end, this is where we're headed. This is what we want. This is what's going to make this art form even greater. So those are my positive notes.
And Quo, what you say, I totally agree with everything you said. And one element that resonates with me is this notion that a lot of leaders have, art leaders have, is that this is too big for me. This is not my problem, or who am I to do this? And they try to conform to what they think the job description, or sometimes what the job description has been given to them. You can change things. You actually can. That's the thing. It might take 2 years. It might get results 10 years, 20 years after you work, but what you do will have an impact if you put it your thoughts and your energy. And actually you have more people who want to help you than you have ever thought.
Yeah.
You just need to have the courage to break. The first mental frame to break is in your head. And that's very hard for everybody on every corners of all those issues. And I go back to what I was saying earlier. On the other hand, you need to do it knowing that you don't want to lose your audience, that you want to build your audience. And so that you need to do this in a very respectful way too. And so you have to do the right thing, but you cannot be righteous about it.
Yes.
And this is very difficult, because sometimes people do the right thing not because they feel it's the right thing, just because they want to be righteous about it. Or they want to look like they are doing the right thing, but their heart is not into it. So the first place to go is in there to see how you feel about this. And then try to really honestly spread those questions, create those opportunities, nurture this work inside you're doing outside, so it works also inside and outside for the other people.
That's real. So much of what you said today has resonated with me, and I know it's resonated with Quo. It's a way in which we work in education and in company culture, and our roles, and just in the things we do in our communities and in our schools. It's a way that it's informed my work, that balance that we always talk about. And I think that it is high time that we, have these conversations and that we begin to move on them. And I so appreciated you spending time today with us and really talking about things on a personal level, and just your own personal experience, and just the example you gave us out of Charleston, where we know so much tragedy has happened there. We here in Dallas, Texas, are not exempt.
Right, Dallas is not better.
No, the U.S. in as a whole is not exempt, and your experience as somebody who is seeing things through sort of foreign eyes, but has also been in and around. You have another perspective. So, I'm glad you had that experience and that you were able to share them with us. I think it's so vitally important, from the executive office to what we do in finance, to what we do in education, what we do in marketing, everything. It has to permeate throughout the entire organization, so that it goes out into our community that way, and it comes out as being organic and authentic. I think that's very important. And I think we're in a time right now, particularly in this time of COVID, where it's past time to have these conversations. It's past time to move on it. And the fact that we're here and utilizing this time that we have, where we're not on the stage, to do something and to talk about some things. I hope it continues. I hope we see ourselves really examining ourselves, like you said, and thinking that we having our hearts and our heads in this, and really decide what we're going to do through COVID and after COVID. And I so appreciate you being here with us, Maestro. It has been an absolute pleasure. You can come back anytime.
Anytime.
Quo, I'm inviting them back, but anytime you want to come back and sit around the table with us. And so, folks, I think that's a call to action today. I think the Maestro has given us a lot of things to think about. Quo has provided some fantastic insight. I hope I have done so as well. Please continue to support TDO Network, support the Dallas Opera. I thank them for giving us the platform today. We want you all to be well. Our thoughts are with you out there. And please leave your comments, engage in the conversation. We want to hear from you. Like I said, it sounds like we got a lot to talk about today. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.